So, they refuse, do they? Well, it's time to force the Jews to do what all other nations have done willingly. From this day forth, I, King Antiochus, decree that every Jew who will not bow down and accept the Greek gods shall die.
Greek or Jew?
Jew. But I have accepted your ways long ago. Surely you see that.
Pledge your soul to the Greek gods or die.
Never.
I pledge my honor to the Greek gods. I pledge my honor.
Get up then. You'll now be a Greek soldier.
I'm honored, sir.
I warn you, though. Never betray your new life, or you'll lose it.
Job chapter 8 and verse 8. For inquire, I pray thee, of the former age, and prepare thyself to the search of their fathers. Shalom, brothers and sisters. This is your brother Yahweh, called to be a minister of our Lord and Savior Yahawashi Hamashiach, by the will of the Heavenly Father Yahweh. I want to give peace, mercy, and blessings to the hopeful elect, which was called aforetime according to the predestination of the word of the Lord, that he would have to himself a remnant that will come out of the nation of Israel, whom he will call, and saying he will call, he will sanctify, and cause to be saved by our Lord and Savior Yahawashi in the end of the world. I wanted to go in this lesson concerning, the video that you just seen at the beginning. That was actually a clip from a cartoon about a time that a lot of so-called Christians don't know about, a lot of our people didn't know about, and it's actually hidden a large part in world history, and it's not even really taught even in the schools. If you know, even during the time of world history class, when they talk about the Greco-Roman period, they never talk about what happened to the Israelites and how there was a forced conversion, right, at the force of the sword upon, right, the people of Israel, right, the Jews that were in the land that had came back from the Persian captivity. Because in Christianity, they'll go over the book of Daniel, they'll have, they'll go over the prophecies, and these pastors will wow the people about the signs of the times and who were the ruling empires and how the Messiah, the Son of Man, is going to come back and set up a kingdom that will never go down. But one key thing that's missing in the Bibles of today is the Apocrypha. Okay, and the Apocrypha addresses a time period of almost half a millennia of what had happened in between the time of the Messiah coming and the time during the end of the Persian captivity. Okay, which you read about in the first Esdras. You also read about that in the book of Nehemiah and the book of Ezra inside the King James. And these 14 books that were removed is part of the reason why there's a lot of confusion about the history, about who the Greeks and Gentiles were that the apostles and the disciples were reaching out to in the book of Acts, and who those letters, were being addressed to in those various cities throughout the so-called Greek-speaking world. And because of this, Christianity has been able to pull the wool over the people's eyes across the world, that there's this belief that salvation is for all nations, meaning all biblical nations, regardless of what nation you're from, which is a lie. As we know, salvation, is for the Israelites, okay, and it's for a remnant, that will believe on the Messiah in the last days, that will receive salvation. So one of the things that we have to do is also to kind of give a better insight into what is going on when brothers and sisters read the New Testament, and they have a better understanding of what happened in the past. And so what we're doing was we're time traveling. The video showed you that there was a decree that was made by Antiochus in the cartoon that went to go to Israel to basically do a forced conversion, all right, of the Israelites to the Greek ways. And as you saw in that, of course, optically, we know that it would have been incorrect, all right? The people that would have been under this forced conversion would have been, darker skinned people, all right, at that time. That would have been, of Israel, primarily, mainly of the three tribes, Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, primarily the ones that came out of the captivity, of course, the descendants of those that came out of the captivity from the Persian Empire. And of course, the remnant of those of the northern kingdom that had actually went back into the land, right, that was whose hearts the Lord had touched to rebuild the temple and to basically set back up an independent place, all right, for our people to come back to, leading up to the Greek Empire, which was started by Alexander the Great, okay, the Macedonian, who was also of the sons of Edom, okay, which we'll probably go into in a future lesson. But as we're concerning this is the reason why we have to go into the Form Age. So what we're going to do, I'm going to go into this word. You've probably seen it in another lesson before, but this is from the Merriam-Webster's Dictionary. This is the word Hellenist, okay? Now, the word Greek, when you go into the scriptures, a lot of times you'll see the word Hellene, all right, which means a Greek, all right? And it says a person living in Hellenistic times who was Greek in language, outlook, and way of life, but not Greek in ancestry, okay? And that's the reason why when you saw the soldier that made the threat said that the guy asked him, are you a Jew or are you a Greek? Okay? Meaning, are you keeping the ways of the Jews or the Greeks? It's plain and simple. Okay? And that he was asking that question because that was the decree. The decree was that you were supposed to turn away from your nationality, from your religion, okay, so to speak, or from your customs, and to adopt not only the gods of the nation, which you saw the one guy, he bowed down and he says he's going to worship the Greek gods, but also to also adopt the outlook, the global outlook of the world and your language based on them. All right. So we know that this is some of the things that was happening with our people. Now it says here, especially a Hellenized Jew. And that's what we're referring to as the Greeks that were believing, all right, on Yahawashi, all right, through the mouth of the apostles, okay, and the other disciples that were preaching unto them, all right. And this is part of the confusion that goes on, is that a lot of people don't understand, is that this very thing, they were Hellenists, but they were not Greek by true ancestry, meaning that they were not the descendants of the same people that conquered them, okay. And this is what you find out when you read the scriptures, all right, because when you go through the scriptures, it's going to show you that. But if you don't have the Apocrypha, all right, which our oppressors took out around this same time, if you look at this particular, the Merriam-Webster Dictionary has been around since 1828. Around that time, there was a concerted effort because amongst the British Empire and their different colonies and their so-called slave colonies where they had our people in captivity, throughout the English-speaking world outside of what you would call the United States at the time, because remember, you had the American Revolution, which made the United States and their original 13 colonies, so to speak, autonomous, and were not under the subjection of rules under the British. If they were, they actually would have had to have let go, all right, of our people that were in chattel slavery earlier, because it was a decree that was done throughout their empire. Okay, so when you go into that time, around that same time, they were planning on releasing, all right, our people from captivity. And what they realized that in places like Jamaica, Barbados, the Bahamas, and all these other English-speaking colonies that they had in the West, and in the West Africa and in Southern Africa, all these places that they were using the Bible, all right, to Christianize the people into believing in Cesare Borgia, or also we know as so-called white Jesus, or Jesus Christ Superstar, all right, which is what they basically are promoting among the masses, is that they knew that these people were going to be reading the Bible, okay, and they needed to keep them in an understanding of the Bible that was going to be limited, and it was going to be based on a worldview concept that would be seen through the eyes of the oppressor, which is the problem that we have this very day when we talk to our own people, our own family, or our friends, or co-workers, or whoever that you talk to. This is part of their issue that they don't understand, and this is one of the reasons why men like Vocab Malone and people that follow him can run around with this false notion and argument about this whole, the Lord coming for the Gentiles and dying for them, rather than dying for the people that were oppressed by the said nations. Okay, now when we go into Antiochus, okay, this is from the Britannica. Now it says here Antiochus the fourth Epiphanes, okay, which we'll get into the prophecy concerning him, but it says it means Epiphanes, which means manifestation of God. Okay, which actually his name is a nomen omen, because it was prophesied about this particular man. Okay, he didn't know that, but his name ended up becoming, a nomen ex omen, meaning a name prediction. All right, and it says Seleucid king of Hellenistic Syrian kingdom. Okay, he was not a Syrian. I'll go into that after we read this to show you that he was not a Syrian. He was called the Syrian king because of the fact of his location in which he dominated, which would be primarily what would be known as back in the day as the land of Canaan, or Palestine, or Israel / Phoenicia / Syria, and then the other areas east of it was his basically his location of control, which we'll hopefully try and show on a map, this particular area. Now, the time, for the sake of understanding, as we talked about the former age, we need to also understand the time frame of these particular events. Alexander conquered this particular region and areas right before he died. This is years later, okay, when these particular events occurred. Now it tells you here that his reign was from 175 to 164 BCE, and when you go on, it says as a ruler he was best known for his encouragement of Greek culture and institutions, and he did this, okay, through what would be considered today jihad. The ways in which he did it, and these Edomites did this thing, both when they spread their Christianity under a false doctrine and under a false Messiah, they did it in the same way that one would spread jihad in Islam, okay, at the force of the sword, as you saw in that cartoon. It was proven, and remember, the soldier told him that if you turn away from worshiping these gods, you face death. Okay, that means if you don't continue this way, and after you join the army, the Greek army, you are going to be considered an apostate, and apostate is punishable by death, or an infidel. Okay, so this shows you the mentality of this man and what happened to many of our people who willingly submit that. And as you saw, they showed you in that same thing that other people did not submit. So some people were willing to die or willing to fight back, which is the story concerning the Maccabees, and which is a story primarily that really the Edomites, under their control, they do not want people to know about the evils, right, of this particular period against the children of Israel. All right. Now it says here his attempts to suppress Judaism, which is, we don't have what's called Judaism. All right, this is a heritage. All right, this is basically what they're saying, is to suppress the Torah or the laws or the covenants that the Most High made to Israel. Okay, brought on the wars of the Maccabees. Okay, and that's what the book of Maccabees is about. Now, as far as the Syrian kingdom, let me go ahead and get in that. I'm going to scroll down real quick, and we're actually going to show you what this that he was not a Syrian. Okay, so when you go in here, you're going to see the Seleucid Empire. Okay, so this is the territory, okay, in which Antiochus ruled on. We're going to go ahead real quick. Okay, and this is what it is. Seleucus is the area that basically they controlled. Okay, and this is from this area, modern day Turkey, all the way down through Syria, Iraq, and then pretty much Iran was the hegemony that he had, was in these particular territories. And as you go on, this is, as he went down, he eventually had a stronghold over Jerusalem, which would have been in this area, okay, which is not shown here because this is based on what the empire was in 281 BC. As you saw, Antiochus Epiphanes did not come into rule until about 175 BCE, okay? Now, as we go back, it goes over the expansion, right, of the empire, okay? And eventually the empire expanded into what was known as Jerusalem, which we'll go into right here, because as you scroll down, it says the expansion in Greek under into Greece and war with Rome. And when you go on, it says Roman Empire, and it says Parthia and Judea. And then it brings up, what happened, okay? Which here, it says Seleucus' younger brother, Antiochus IV Epiphanes, now seized the throne. And he attempted to restore Seleucid power and prestige with the successful war against the old enemy, Ptolemaic Egypt. Okay, and then when you go down, it tells you about him, what happened. It says in the latter part of his reign, he saw a further disintegration of the empire despite his best efforts. Weakened economically, military, and by loss of prestige, the empire became vulnerable to rebels in the eastern areas of the empire, who began to furthermore undermine the empire, while Parthians moved into the power vacuum to take over the old Persian lands. It is Antiochus' aggressive Hellenizing, okay, or de-Judaizing, so meaning removing the heritage of the Israelites, okay, because he did this in a full-scale attack, as you saw in the that video, okay, and it says here activities provoked a full-scale armed rebellion in Judea, the Maccabean revolt, all right, because he was doing the most, okay, which was prophesied he was going to do this, okay, and we'll definitely get into that particular prophecy as well. It says here, efforts to deal with both the Parthians and the Jews, as well as retain control of the provinces, at the same time proved beyond the weakened empire's power. Antiochus died during the military expedition against the Parthians in 164 BC, okay, which just showed you that was the end of his reign. Now, as we go back, we're going to go into the Hellenization or the Judaizing, and this is one of the things that Esau hides in the school system. These Edomites and a lot of these heathens and a lot of our people, they come to us talking either on the block or on the comment board, or they go and they create their own videos and they say how we're crazy to say that we're Israelites, and how we don't understand the New Testament, and who the Gentiles are and who are the Greeks. And they purposely remove history that a lot of these people are actually familiar with, because there's no way that somebody can know about biblical history and following the events and times of the people, and then you're going to skip on one of the most storied people in world history, which was Alexander. You got these Edomites that they'll do a breakdown of Daniel, and they'll tell you, how this particular prophecy is talking about Alexander. They'll tell you that, but then when you ask them to find it in the scriptures, in their 66 books that they have, they're not able to find it. Okay, but they know about this. A lot of them know about this, but they don't want to talk about it because it exposes the lies that they're teaching, all right, and what has been taught to our people, and why so many of our people are confounded, all right. So many of our people are completely confounded over this particular topic. Okay, so what I'm going to do, we're going to go ahead and scroll down, and we're going to go into what happened with this guy. Okay, so it says efforts to Hellenize the kingdom. Okay, and we saw in his little biography that was one of the things that he was known for. Okay, he became a person that was forcing Hellenization upon, all the people that were within his realm. All right. So when you go here, it says both economically and socially, he made efforts to strengthen his kingdom, inhabited in the main by Orientals. Okay, that means Easterners. Okay, people east of the territory of basically known as the Greek states. Okay, Asia Minor, and then you have the of course the islands, the Greekish islands, all right, or peninsulas, by founding and fostering Greek cities. So what this guy did is that he started creating these particular Greek cities and commercial centers, right, in these lands that were basically heavily Hellenized. All right, he was doing these building of these cities, all right, to basically create temples and a haven, all right, for people to be Hellenized in all these areas. Okay, so it says even before he had begun his reign, he had contributed to the building of the temple of Zeus in Athens and to the adornment of the theater. He enlarged Antioch on the Orontes by adding the section to the city named Epiphanes after him. Okay, and this is where the Ephesians come from. Okay, Ephesus, and that's where a lot of our people settled, because these were some of these cities were like places where a lot of our Hellenized people can escape basically being taken down by our people that were following the laws, because there was a great division among our people during the Maccabean period, and a lot of our people fled to these different places all right, to seek after the Greekish ways, okay, and became fully Hellenized and forsook the covenant, right, of their fathers. And that's the reason why you see such a great division amongst those that had grown up in those customs 100 or plus years later. By the time you get to the book of Acts, you see the reason why there was issues with, Timothy concerning the state of his father, meaning that they knew that his dad was Hellenized, that he was a Greek, meaning he was a Hellenized Jew. And a lot of that stuff goes over a lot of people's head. And if you go to that last video, that's one of the reasons why I brought up that issue with Timothy, is for you to have a better understanding of what was going on. And you got to understand what is actually happened. Yet a lot of our people who were traitors, all right, to their own people, and led to the deaths of the people that were keeping the customs and the laws. And you read about these things when you get into the book of Maccabees. All right, so when we go on, let's see if we can find the Hellenization. Here it is. So Antiochus' Hellenizing policies brought him into conflict with the prosperous Oriental temple organizations, and particularly with the Jews. Since Antiochus III's reign, the Jews had enjoyed extensive autonomy under their high priest, because under his father, everything was cool from the time really when you go to Alexander, because Alexander actually came through Jerusalem and actually didn't do nothing, because he was shown that him coming and ruling over the earth was actually prophesied in our books, and he actually took great delight into that, and because of that he left us alone. And so did a lot of the other generals after them. They basically allowed our people to be autonomous until this man, okay, Antiochus came and basically tried to change things through forced Hellenization. Okay, so it says here they were divided into two parties. All right, the Orthodox Hasidians, all right, the pious ones, and Reform Party that favored Hellenism. Okay, so that's what happens. There was two factions that were there. You had the Hasidians, which were the ones that were keeping, all right, or beholden to the covenant, all right, of our fathers, and you had the other side that was growing increasingly more, wanting to be more like the Greeks. Okay, so you had those factions of basically your Pan-Hellenics, right, your Boule type people that exist, your Greek and your Greek organizations, all right, your Pan-Hellenic party, your Kappa Alpha Psi's, your Omega Psi Phi's, your Alpha Phi Alpha, all right, all those groups that you hear about now that our people go to, and you see how they're being used against their own people, all right, the Boule, all right, the Eastern Star, Lynx, all these little organizations that basically set themselves for our demise and are set themselves against their own people for the sake of our oppressors. That happened back then. Okay, so it says here, for financial reasons, Antiochus supported the Reform Party, and returned for a considerable sum permitted the high priest Jason to build a gymnasium in Jerusalem and introduce the Greek mode of educating young people, which we'll get into. So even this is from a so-called secular source. And they're even saying the exact same thing that we're going to eventually read in the book of Maccabees. Okay, so it says here that in 172, after an even bigger tribute, he appointed Menelaus in the place of Jason. In 169, however, while Antiochus was campaigning in Egypt, Jason conquered Jerusalem with the exception of the citadel, and murdered many adherents of the rival Menelaus. So you see here that he was killing his own people, man. All right, this is an Israelite man, Jason, killing his own people. All right. When Antiochus returned from Egypt in 167, he took Jerusalem by storm and enforced its Hellenization. The city fortified its privileges and was permanently garrisoned by Syrian soldiers. Okay, now it goes into the revolt of the Maccabees, but we're not going to be able to go into that. What I want to do is also, before we go on into the prophecy in Daniel and then also in Maccabees, I'm going to go into this whole aspect of them calling him a Syrian kingdom, all right, or Syrian king. Okay, which that's a lie. He was not a Syrian, and we're going to prove it. So what we're going to do, we're going to go back to his predecessors. Okay, so the original person that took over, this is one of Alexander's generals. Okay, so it says here, when you look at him, his name is Seleucus I Nicator. All right, and it says here that he was a Diodici, all right, the rival generals, relatives, and friends of Alexander the Great, who fought for control over his empire after his death. Having previously served as an infantry general of Alexander the Great, he essentially assumed the title of Basileus, which means king, and established the Seleucid Empire over the bulk of the territory when Alexander had conquered in Asia, okay, which means the eastern part, from basically modern-day Turkey all the way to modern-day Iran, all the way basically to the borders of India, essentially, is what he took over during that time, okay, after he had died. Now, when you go here, it shows you that this particular man, who is basically a descendant, all right, of later on, which would have been Antiochus Epiphanes IV, he was born in Macedon, okay? It even has it here. He was born in Europos, Macedon, okay, which that's in basically near Greece. If you see here, right here in the orange part, that's Macedon, all right? This is known as Greece, okay? This right here is Sparta. This is modern-day Turkey, which the Persian Empire had control of right before the time of the wars with Alexander. All right, so as you go through the successors, okay, his successor after him was Soter. Okay, the next one was Theos. The next one is Seleucus II Callinicus. And then you got Seleucus III, all right, Serenus. And then as you go through, you got Antiochus III, okay, which is the, all right, the forefather, okay, of who would have been the fourth Philopator. And then as you go on, it keeps on to the successor of Antiochus the fourth. And then this is during the reign of Antiochus Epiphanes, okay? And I'm going through the successors. So them calling him Assyrian is a lie. So that way, you know, you don't get thrown off, because Esau puts these type of things that doesn't let you know the origin, all right, of these men that controlled these particular regions after the time of Alexander. And they try and put these type of atrocities upon another nation of people, all right, which the Syrians were part of the army that he created, no doubt about it. They did join that army. A lot of them were Hellenized, and they did join his army during those times. But the leader of all that madness was Antiochus IV Epiphanes, who was a descendant, right, of the original general, going back to Alexander's original army, all right, with the first general that we showed. So now we can go ahead and go into the prophecy in Daniel concerning him. So this is Daniel chapter 8 and verse 8. Therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and for it came up four notable ones towards the four winds of heaven. Okay, so the goat that waxed strong was talking about Alexander the Great. Okay, and right when he was at the peak of his strength and he had conquered, all right, all these different lands, and basically everybody had been subdued under him, that's when he ended up dying. And then his territory was split into four different regions. Okay, so that's the four notable ones, is the four basically generals, which one of those I already had showed you, you know, going down the line of succession to Antiochus Epiphanes. All right, so that's the one. And then what's going to tell you, verse 9, out of one of them, meaning out of one of these horns, came another person, right? Came forth a little horn, which waxed exceeding great toward the south and toward the east and toward the present land. And it waxed great even to the host of heaven. And it cast some of the hosts and of the stars to the ground and stamped upon them. Okay, that's talking about the Israelites. This is what he did. And we basically saw that in the video, just as an illustration of this particular event that was prophesied to happen. Okay, so, and this is the prophecy that Daniel had received. Now, what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and go to Maccabees, chapter 1, starting at verse 10, referring to him. And there came out of them a wicked root, all right, that sang forth a little horn that stamped on the host of heaven, which means the Israelites. Okay, our people are likened unto the stars. So again, and there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the king, okay, which we showed you his father before him, who had basically, gave a lot of autonomy to our people under the high priest before him. They said, who had been a hostage at Rome, and he reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. So it says, in those days went there out of Israel wicked men who persuaded many, saying, let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us, for since we departed from them, we had much sorrow. And this particular one is the party, all right, of the Hellenistic party that was against the Hasmoneans, okay, or the Hasidians, okay. These are the ones that were the opposing party that was in the land that wanted to be like the Edomites, okay. They wanted to be like them, and they ended up succeeding when, a bribery was made to have them take over. So it says, so this suffice pleased them well. Then certain of the people were so forward herein that they went to the king, who gave them license to do after the ordinance of the heathen. It says, whereupon they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem according to the customs of the heathen. And that's what we read about in here. Okay, when you go into the Judea part, it says that he built these things right here. It says, permitted the high priest Jason to build a gymnasium in Jerusalem and to introduce the Greek mode of educating the young people. So we go back, okay, verse 14, whereupon they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem, according to the customs of the heathen, and made themselves uncircumcised. So they literally stopped circumcising their sons. Okay, this is the circumcision and the uncircumcision that's referred to in the book of Romans, that's referred to in all the other epistles. This is what it's talking about. This is the group of them that did this and forsook the holy covenant. Okay, so they became strangers to the covenant of promise. Okay, there's descendants after them, and joined themselves to the heathen and were sold to do mischief. Okay, so this is exactly what happened during that time period. Now we're going to go into another account in the second book of Maccabees, chapter 4, verse 7. But after the death of Seleucus, when Antiochus, called Epiphanes, took the kingdom, Jason, the brother of Onias, labored underhand to be high priest, promising under the king by intercession 360 talents of silver, and another revenue 80 talents. Beside this, he promised to assign 150 more if he would have license to set him up a place of exercise, and for the training up of the youth in the traditions of the heathen, and to write them of Jerusalem to be the name of Antiochus. Right? So he wanted to change the name of our people, right, to be called Antiochans, all right, or Antiochans. You see how wicked that is? You see how wicked this is? And this is the same people that are around today. They're trying to force us to call ourselves Americans. The same people that are around today, they're forcing you to call yourself Americans. They're saying that we belong to this land. We built this. We're this. This is our culture. This is who we are. And they're forcing you, and they're talking against you, and you don't want you to call yourself an American anymore, or African American. They want you to be named after an Edomite, Amerigo Vespucci. This is the same thing that Jason was doing. Verse 10, which when the king had granted, and he had gotten into the hand the rule, he forthwith brought his own to the Greekish fashion, and the royal privileges granted of special favor to the Jews by the means of John, the father of Epiphanes, who went ambassador to Rome for amenity and aid, he took away, and putting down the governments which were according to the law, he brought up new customs against the law. Okay? Yes, this is getting real ugly, right? It says, for he built gladly a place of exercise under the tower itself, and brought forth the young chief men under his subjection, and made them wear a hat. Now this was the height of Greek fashions, and increase of heathenish manner through the exceeding profaneness of Jason, that ungodly wretch, and no high priest, that the priests had no courage to serve any more at the altar, but despising the temple and neglecting the sacrifice, hastened to be partakers of the unlawful allowances in the place of exercise, after the game of discus called them forth. Okay, so they started basically going and playing. They didn't even, the young men that were supposed to be working the temple, they couldn't bear to not, they could watch other people have fun being Greeks in the land, that they were like, no, we want to play too. We want to basically forsake the temple, and we want to basically throw the discus with y'all too. We want to basically not do this work and be like the Greeks, right, and do their customs. All right. I mean, it's a history that a lot of our people don't know. By reason whereof sore calamity came upon them, for they had them that be their enemies. All right. So how's it? Their enemies and avengers you want to be like, whom customs they follow so earnestly, and unto whom they desire to be like in all things, as it is unto this day. For it is not a light thing to do wickedly against the laws of God, but the time following shall declare these things. Now, there's another scripture as well, and you're going to see another thing, which goes back to that question, Jew or Greek, right, that the guy was asked earlier. So as you go down, I believe it's, yeah, here it is. So actually we'll start at the top. Verse 1. Not long after this, the king sent an old man of Athens to compel the Jews to depart from the laws of their fathers and not to live after the laws of God. Okay, so they sent, all right, an old man of Athens, and more than likely this man was an Israelite who basically had been living in Athens and living in the way of the Greeks, because what they do is they send people that are fully down with the system, like your Martin Luther King type guys, your elder statements that they can bring, and they can basically have this guy come with a procession of people, and he's looking all a certain way in his Greek outfit, and he's coming saying, hey, I'm telling you that the ways of the Greeks are better. I'm living a great life in Athens. I've learned under the great teachers. I go to their universities. And he says, me and my family have lived a great life. And this is what they've done, man. They always do these things. And this is what our people always fall for, is these older men that make themselves appear to be leaders of our people. I would not be surprised if this guy was an Israelite that was living in Athens that did this. Okay. An old man, bruh. An old man who hates his own people, who hates the laws of our fathers, who hates the covenant of promise, all right, that wants to be like the heathen, okay? And they always set up these type of people, all right? And so he compelled them to forsake the laws of their fathers and not to live after the laws of God, and to pollute also the temple, okay? Told them to pollute the temple in Jerusalem, to call the temple of Jupiter Olympus, and that the garrison of Jupiter, the defender of strangers, as they did desire to dwell in the place. Okay, so the defender of strangers, they would be the strangers that would be in need of defense, and that's what they're telling you, to go and believe in him, to believe in Jupiter. He's going to defend you. So it's the same old cooning, all right? And this is no different than us being told to call, all right, after Jesus Christ or Cesare Borgia, and to believe in that same image, for to pray to him for the oppression that's happening to us. This is what these guys do. Tell you to coon it up. It says, the coming in of this mischief was sore and grievous to the people, for the temple was filled with riot and revelings by the Gentiles, who dallied with harlots and had to do with women within the circuit of the holy places, and beside that brought in things that were not lawful. The altar also was filled with profane things, which the law forbiddeth. Neither was it lawful for a man to keep the Sabbath days, or ancient fast or feast, that's what it means, or to profess himself at all to be a Jew. Okay? And that's the reason why that you see in the cartoon that threat was made, man. And see, a lot of our people don't know that this is what happened to us. Okay? These are the type of things that were done to influence our people. Many of our people went towards that direction. And those same people, the descendants of those same people, left the land, settled in these other cities, all right, that Antiochus had actually built, in his area where he had control, he built cities like Caesarea Philippi, or some of these cities like Caesarea Philippi, which is the northern part of our land. Those were built by these Greco-Romans as a place where they can go. They built up cities even bigger, like Ephesus and Antioch, all right, and they made these places centers of Hellenization. A lot of our people went to places like Athens, okay, they went to places like Corinth, they went to places like Galatia, okay, they went to places like Rome, so they can continue practicing these particular customs. That's where many of our people ended up being scattered to during these times, okay. So we're going to go ahead and finish it off. This is Galatians chapter 3 and verse 26. For ye are all children of Yahweh by faith in Mashiach Yahawashi. This is referring to the believers that were in Galatia. For as many of you as been baptized into Mashiach have put on Mashiach. There is neither Jew nor Greek. Okay, so meaning whether your background was, whether you grew up a Jew or whether you grew up in the Greek customs, you can still be one with Yahawashi. And in order to do that, you would have to ultimately put away Greek customs. You can't worship Jupiter. So how are these people still considered Greeks if they're not worshiping? They're considered that because of their background and where they came out of from, okay, and what the language that they speak. But this was the division that was happening among our people, as we had already read, and as you read in the time of Judas Maccabees and the Maccabean revolt, you will read about that division even further. All right, but ultimately the Lord came to bring a lot of those people who were descendants of those that had fell into Hellenization back to him through repentance and belief in him. Okay, so going on, there's neither bond nor free, there's neither male nor female, for ye are all one in Mashiach Yahawashi. And if ye be Mashiach's, then are ye Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. And as you go through the scriptures, if you read about Abraham's seed, it'll always say throughout the scriptures that Abraham's seed is known as the children of Israel, and ultimately the children of Israel that are fully justified by him will have faith in Mashiach Yahawashi. So hopefully, this is edifying. And again, I want to give all praises and glory to Yahweh Ba'asham Yahawashi. Peace, mercy, and blessings to the hopeful elect scattered throughout the four corners of the earth. Shalom.